Here we go, folks. It's Monday again. The German-Netherlands game just ended, and Alex and I are sitting here at our desk, got the microphones ready to record another episode of GFC for you guys.
That's right, Rick. Happy Monday, everyone. Yeah, in this episode today, we've got the latest updates concerning the world of German football. Of course, the Nations League, and a special on the controversial ruling on player contracts by the European Court of Justice for you. So I suggest, let's dive right in.
Alex, first and foremost, let's look back at the performance of the German national team in the Nations League these past days. We have a 2-1 win over Bosnia on Friday in an incredible and interesting but rather rudimentary setup in Seneca. The dressing room looked straight out of the 70s and gave me a feel of my times as a mediocre youth player, somewhere in the German countryside. But anyways, the team took away 3 points and headed into tonight's game with a chance to secure the quarterfinals. So, yeah, quite exciting. But what was your take on that?
Yeah, you're right, man. It looked a bit like, one of those changing or dressing rooms in a small neighborhood kind of sports club. Certainly a humbling experience for our highly paid athletes here. And who knows, maybe it was actually the plan of the Bosnians to somehow influence or confuse the team with that. But yeah, luckily the players were able to kind of ignore this rather uncommon environment and put on a solid and controlled game. I think there was never really any doubt that Germany would not win this game. And in my opinion, the result should have been even higher. Germany actually scored 3 more goals from offside positions that were all disallowed later on. So yeah, overall, job well done.
Yeah, real quick on the newbies also, we had a couple of guys like Johnny Burkhardt that we discussed last episode. Angelo Stiller got a little bit more workload compared to his last nomination. So it was good to see these newbies in the national team, and they all had solid performances, including Tim Kleindienst up there. So you couldn't really see that core players were missing, which made me really confident about the ability of the German national team to compensate a couple of injuries and key players missing.
Yeah, I agree. Especially since we had a lot of injuries before this match day or those match weekend. 5 or 6 key players were out of the squad, and it almost seemed like a bit of an improvised type of squad. But it also shows you that the squad depth of the national team is actually fairly deep. And as you said, all of them had very solid performances. We're going to talk a little bit about the Netherlands game as well in a minute, where another guy celebrated his debut for the team, Jamie Leveling from VfB Stuttgart. So it just seems that all the players that Nagelsmann is trying out, they seem to kind of work in the team, and also the mood overall seems to be very good. So I sense that there's a really good atmosphere among the team. Of course, it always helps when you kind of have a couple of blocks of multiple players from one team. Like right now, we have 5-6 Stuttgart players, and they all kind of know each other very well already. But yeah,
right,
pretty decent appearance so far.
Yeah, and then Undaf continues to score as well. He accounted for both goals, and Bosnia scored a third one as well. That was denied later on by the VAR. So very, very solid there, and gives me hope that a great team here for 2026 is forming as well.
Yeah, and have you seen Undaf's goal when Florian Wirtz assisted him with this sort of almost like a no-look pass where he kind of turned around in the box. Incredible vision, and he just kind of sees or has a sense that Undaf is better positioned in his back, and he just kind of drops the ball, and Undav scores. So yeah, really, really good performance here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, aside from that, we're also looking back to the second and certainly, I should say, more glamorous matchup of this Nations League weekend between Germany and Netherlands in the Allianz Arena in Munich. As we said, the game just ended a couple of minutes ago with 1-0 for Germany. Before the match, the German Football Association actually paid tribute to the 4 Germany legends who retired from the game this year. Well, not entirely from the game, but at least from the national team. 3 of them actually were attending the game also in person. Manuel Neuer, Thomas Müller, and also İlkay Gündoğan all received their honors down there on the pitch before the match. The 4th legend, and arguably, probably to me at least, the biggest legend, Toni Kroos, wasn't able to make it. But of course, he should not be forgotten here. He certainly wrote history, not just for Germany, but also for Real Madrid and all the other clubs he played for. Bayern Munich, of course, as well. Incredible guys. And it's also kind of cool to see, these are, of course, big names, very established players, World Cup winners for Germany. Even though they are off the pitch right now, they're not wearing the Germany jersey again. It's good to see that the next generation is there to kind of replace them and write their own piece of history. Let's talk a little bit about the game. I think a very disciplined performance by the German team, despite a couple of personal changes, as we said, due to injuries. And unfortunately, we have another one. The latest one is Chris Führich, another Stuttgart winger. He had to leave the camp after picking up an injury during practice last week. And nevertheless, it's probably fair to assume that this team is not going to play together in this exact combination very often. But as we discussed just now, also the newer additions to the team seem to be all very well integrated to the squad. They all fulfilled their roles with great discipline. And especially in the first half, Germany created a lot of chances. They actually scored after only a few minutes into the game, but then the goal was again disallowed due to an apparent offside position by Serge Gnabry. I think it was at least debatable. The referee,
strange moment.
Yeah, very strange. The referee said it was a passive offside situation that then turned active with Gnabry kind of interfering with the game. But at that point, the ball had already been handled by 2 Dutch defenders. So yeah, the question here is, was it a new situation in the game or not? Of course, the ball was still inside the Dutch box, so one could argue it was kind of still the same attack or the same situation. But other referees might have made a different decision. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the time it took again for the VAR, right? It was almost at least 3 minutes, if not 4 minutes, that it took him to review multiple pictures, and that 2 minutes into the game, it's just not good for the flow of a soccer match if you have that type of interruption. So not a big fan of the decision and the whole VAR process in this case again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could hear the reaction from the crowd. I mean, Munich is not known to be the most exciting crowd, at least not when Bayern is playing. But the reaction from the crowd was very obvious. Let's say, call it a bit of the sound of dissatisfaction.
And that's another thing, though, because you're mentioning the crowd, right? The atmosphere at Germany games definitely improved. You can tell that the new squad, gave also the emotions back to the stands. You see a lot of fan groups forming. You have more cheers than before. So it's a different experience again compared to a year and a half ago, where we were really on the bottom of anything that I can ever recall since I watched the German national team. The mood has never been so bad. So Julian Nagelsmann and his team really managed to turn this around, got the fans behind them again, and it's actually enjoyable to watch these games again and to listen and hear the atmosphere in the stadium. Everyone is excited about this team now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And also based on what I've seen, as you said, not only today, but over the past couple of weeks and months, and pretty much since Nagelsmann took charge, I'm quite positive about this team. You know, a while ago under Hansi Flick, we would have probably lost this game. And that already is a big step forward. Yeah, one could argue that it was not the most exciting game to watch, but nonetheless, the Dutch team didn't create any particular situations either. And Germany, over the most part of the match, was in full control. The second half started a bit slow when Nagelsmann took Florian Wirtz and Alex Pavlovic off the pitch. You could feel that this changed the dynamics on the field a bit, with less ball possession for Germany, but nonetheless, the Dutch team wasn't really able to create any real advantage out of this. But yeah, we've talked about the squad depth. I think it's remarkable. The winning goal was scored by another guy who made his debut today for Germany, Jamie Leveling. Got subbed off after about 80 minutes after a really, really strong debut. He was also the guy who scored the very first goal just right after kickoff. Angelo Stiller was there in the starting 11. Tim Kleindienst, you mentioned. So yeah, and actually a few minutes before the final whistle, also Oli Baumann got a chance to demonstrate that he's a really good goalie when he made a good save after a strong shot by Daniel Mahlen. So yeah, overall, everyone kind of got the chance to show their skills.
Yeah, this is the most important and impressive takeaway, that new players come into the national team. They play with a lot of confidence, and you can't really tell that this is the first game, or that they don't really have, much experience on that international level playing for their country. So that is, for me, one of the biggest achievements of Julian Nagelsmann, how he managed that and how he got the squad behind his philosophy and developed that confidence. So yeah, it's fun to watch. You don't really see the missing players. It seems to be a team, aside of what you said, with the changes in the second half and that little drop off. But overall, it's a solid performance. They're very solid in the defense. They can hold, a 1-0 lead. They don't get into a situation where they get goals scored against them because of stupid individual mistakes like in the past. So that is a different level now. And again, that's impressive and makes me very positive for the future. Yeah, but Alex, one thing that we have to discuss as well, the national team and Juergen Klopp were two things closely connected with each other for a while. Since almost every German had hoped we will see Kloppo as the national coach after the World Cup 26. So, yeah, and that mainly because, everyone expected Nagelsmann to go back to club soccer. But that has changed this week a little bit. We now learned that Klopp will join the Red Bull sports team as the global head of soccer. So I'm, again, curious to hear from you. How does that change the chances of Klopp ever becoming the national coach? And let's be honest, how does this change, make you feel about Klopp? And we honored him, obviously, in this podcast last week, and both loved him as a football romantic. But this Red Bull move changes that a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, man, I don't really know what to say. I mean, the news came out, the morning after our recording from last week. And it was just such a huge surprise when I saw it when I read it for the first time. I actually thought it was some sort of a joke. And of course, it's a super controversial move, right? We've talked about Juergen last week. We talked about his emotional connection that he has with the game, with his clubs or former clubs and their fans. We talked about his seemingly authentic football philosophy and all these values that he appears to stand for. He seems to have thrown them out of the window, basically. It almost feels like a like a betrayal. On the other hand, and this is now a very fine line, but I wanted to share my thoughts on this nevertheless. We both know Juergen as a very innovative guy, right? We discussed last week how he was able to kind of transform all these clubs he worked for. We discussed about his footballing philosophy, the famous counter-pressing approach that to some extent has changed the game and changed how many of the teams nowadays defend and attack both at the same time in a way. Now, and this is where it gets tricky, I personally still believe that Red Bull is kind of representing everything that's wrong with the over-commercialization of the sport these days in terms of course, their corporate ownership model, first and foremost, all the branding and stuff, changing names and logos of traditional clubs that they've bought over the years. But then there's one thing that both Red Bull and Juergen have in common, and it's that they are innovative in terms of their footballing philosophy. You may not like it, but Red Bull also follows a fairly clear strategy that is new to the game. I certainly do not endorse this strategy, and I also do not endorse his move. I believe that he is also contradicting his own personal stance on the commercialization of football. He was very outspoken in the past about what he thinks of models like Red Bull. But I think what he can do at Red Bull and the impact he can make there might in fact be huge. So I think in a weird and very unsatisfying way, I could well imagine that he is going to enjoy this job, and he's probably going to do a good job there too. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
No, I mean, well said. My I can follow along. And I do agree with your statements about the innovation that both have in common, and that they're both contributing in an impressive manner to the development of soccer. And I do think, and that's what I'm most afraid of, that Jurgen Klopp is actually going to do an excellent job at Red Bull, and we will see them stronger than ever. Potentially competing for a German national championship very soon. I mean, they're close already, but with Jurgen Klopp on the team, things could change and be even more positive going forward for them. But I also try to look at this, from his personal motives, and try to take into account what he had said over the past month after saying goodbye to Liverpool. He mentioned a couple of times that he doesn't want a sideline job anymore, that he has to give his job everything, that he has to go all in every day, and that he can just not, comprehend the pressure on the sideline anymore, and therefore needs a break. But he also shared in his latest interview, when he announced the job at Red Bull, that he still has love and passion for football. And he mentioned in other interviews that he likes to travel and go around and see things. So this head of soccer position is the perfect combination for Jurgen Klopp, right? He has the opportunity to travel, to, visit teams all over the world. Red Bull, I believe, nowadays has a club in Brazil. They have Red Bull New York, obviously, Salzburg, Leipzig, 10% of Leeds United. Now they're looking to buy Paris FC. So the network of Red Bull alone, plus any soccer philosophy that's played anywhere in the world, he can go there, he can check it out, he can bring the learnings back and implement it again, in this corporate structure that we both dislike. But the position itself and what Jurgen Klopp wants to do going forward, that fits very well together. And, maybe some of the other clubs, the more traditional clubs, should have made him a similar offer. When he said he doesn't want to become coach, what else is out there for Jurgen Klopp? I think Red Bull just came with an offer that he couldn't say no to. And who knows, Bayern has a similar network. Other big clubs, whether in England, in the Premier League or Bundesliga, La Liga, they run similar networks nowadays. So why didn't they go to Jurgen Klopp and approach him with a similar position? I bet if that would have happened, we'd probably see him choosing a different club over Red Bull. But that's just my 2 cents.
You might be right. I guess we'll never find out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, of course, a brilliant position. I would love to have that job, man.
We definitely have to cut him out of the list of football romantics, though, now, Alex. So
at least for the time being, yeah.
Right. For those of you that are still football romantics and are looking for other role models, we have one more for you. There is a German icon that said goodbye to professional football this week, and that still reflects the traditional values of the game that we all love so much. So, let's clap our hands together for Lukas Podolski, or King Poldi, that said goodbye in his living room, the Rhein Energie Stadium in Cologne last week, where many friends joined him. And for his incredible farewell match that was live on German TV. And I'll be honest, Alex, you know me and how emotional I get when great sportsmen, leave the platform, end their career. I teared up a couple of times before and after the game when he was honored by the club and the fans. You gotta love that, Alex, no?
Of course you did. I would have been surprised if you didn't. But yeah, you're right. Super emotional scenes there. Of course, it was beautiful to see Podolski playing his farewell match in Cologne, where things started off, where he returned even later on during his very successful career. It was actually in Cologne where he played the most matches, but he had the least success, which kind of says it all, what kind of a guy he is, right? So yeah, proper legend, man. We should also not forget, aside from, him being so relatable and closely connected with the fans, he was also a very talented footballer. He played 130 matches for the German national team, which is a lot, I think. Müller only has 131. So Podolski was part of that revolution of the national team after the Euros 2008 that eventually led to
24.
Yeah, exactly. He already made
2004
his debut.
with Schweinsteiger. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He made his debut in 2004. I think after the Euros in 2008, the team actually changed even more when these guys were really the center of attention. But yeah, you're right. He debuted a couple years before that. But yeah, needless to say, he's a World Cup winner. He has a brutal left foot, has had a great career with exciting clubs. He played for, of course, Cologne, Bayern Munich, Arsenal London, Galatasaray Istanbul. He did a couple months at Inter. He moved to Japan. He moved. Now he's playing for his, I guess maybe one of his home clubs as well in Poland, Zabrze. Please excuse my terrible pronunciation, but yeah, just a cool guy, man. And he's not just a great footballer; he's a smart businessman off the pitch as well. He owns a couple of kebab shops and an ice cream brand. So yeah, bro is set for life, and you got to respect him.
Right. Yeah, music festival, I believe, as well. And now he is a co-owner of, is it the Icon League or is it the other one? One of these formats there. Yeah. So he'll, and a lot of people didn't think that he could actually become more than just a good soccer player, right? he always kept his street attitude. He mentioned that as well at the interview. I thought that was funny. He's like, I was always a guy from the streets, and it was important for me to stay that same guy and keep my values alive. And you know, a lot of people had looked, I don't want to say down on him, but that's probably what it was. You know, they said, hey, this is a soccer player. He's probably not the smartest guy, but he might not speak the smartest way, but he is probably one of the smartest players that I know of that generation with a business mindset. He certainly had good advisors, but he'll do well. He will continue to accelerate, and people just love him for, you know, his way, his personality, the good characters that he kept throughout his career. So yeah, like you said, we can only say, you know, farewell. Great career, great person, and I hope we'll see him in some form of fashion again, and he won't completely disappear from the screens.
I agree. I'm sure we will see him again.
Yeah, but with that, folks, it's time for our special this week. We will wrap up the updates from last week right here, and we'll share our take on the contract ruling of the European Court of Justice with you. GFC special feature.
Yeah, Rick, let's talk about the ruling that could potentially change the transfer market in the future. And I need to provide a little bit of context here. So about 2 weeks ago, the European Court of Justice declared that certain parts of FIFA's transfer regulations are incompatible with European Union law. Now, specifically, when it comes to how compensation is calculated in a case when a player unilaterally terminates their contract, which frankly doesn't happen very often. You rarely hear players leaving the club. You know, you've heard of players' disputes with the club, but it's not really common, and potentially not really possible for players to just end their contract and leave their club. Like you and I, we potentially could just, you know, resign from our employers and walk out of the door. For football players, this obviously works a little different. The case was originally initiated by a former football player, a French gentleman, Lassana Diarra. I think he played also a couple of years at Real Madrid, so it's a famous name. He actually challenged, together with his legal team, those FIFA rules on player transfers, stating that they restricted the freedom of movement and were anti-competitive. Now, in a previous ruling that actually led to, you know, initiated this whole discussion, Diarra had been ordered to pay 10 million euros to his former club, Lokomotiv Moscow, after a contractual dispute between the club and the player in 2014. Now, going back to this ruling, specifically, the court criticized Article 17 of the FIFA regulation on the status and transfer of players. This article states that basically both the player and their new club can be held jointly liable for compensation to the previous club. However, the European Court of Justice ruled that this regulation does not align with EU labor laws because, and now I quote, it disproportionately hinders a player's ability to seek new employment and therefore limiting their career opportunities in a system that they consider not adequate in terms of protecting players' rights as workers. So, what does this mean now for the transfer market and for the future of European football? Well, this ruling could in fact significantly change the football transfer market. It may force FIFA, and I think they have already kind of started the analysis or the discussion in the background. It may force FIFA to revise the transfer rules. They have to ensure that they comply with the European Union competition laws and the labor rights and so on. So eventually FIFA will need to work with player unions to create a more transparent and, in their view, fair system. as a consequence, it could result in more player autonomy in terms of, them deciding on their own will when they want to leave a club, which club they want to join out of their free will, but also changes in how transfer fees and contracts are handled. So, very complex topic. I did a lot of talking now. So I'm actually keen to hear your opinion. What do you think about the ruling, and what do you think are the impacts on the transfer market here?
In my opinion, the big winners are actually the players. When you look at this ruling, the player so far was bound to the contract. So let's say they had 2 years left on their paper. If the club wouldn't agree to an early transfer, and this is how long they had to play for that particular club. But now it enables them at the end of each quarter to say, do I still want to work here, or do I want to go somewhere else where I can make, more money? I'm playing very well right now. I'm here in, the first French league is not as competitive as, let's say, La Liga. Real Madrid is making me a good offer. So starting October 1st, I would rather play for Real Madrid, where I make more money and where I can perform on a higher level. So that's essentially what that means. So it's very good for the players, and there's more money in the game for the players. But what I'm more interested in, and where a potential benefit could come in as well, is what does this ruling mean for the transfer sums that are currently being paid? So with this little security, would Bayern Munich, for example, go ahead in the future and pay $100 million to Tottenham Hotspur in order to get Harry Kane signed on, a year before the contract would expire, and he could come basically as a free agent? I don't think that this is that clubs are going to take this type of risk anymore going forward. I think you will see much lower transfer sums if they don't disappear entirely. I would, the way how I see this working right now is that why would there be a reason for any type of transfer payment? At the end of the day, a player can change any quarter. So you need to make it way more attractive to the player, itself, to keep staying and keep playing for your club. But you don't need to really please your competitors anymore, and by buying them, buying players out of the contract at high sums. So for me, this is really a decision again that could completely change how we currently look at transferring players. I don't know if that makes sense, Alex.
Yeah, well, I get your point, Rick, but wouldn't it not only shift the money that is currently transferred from one club to another to buy a player out of their contract to higher sign-on bonuses for the players themselves? So what I'm a bit afraid of is these professional footballers already earn insane amounts of money that most likely you and I and everybody else who's listening in is never going to make in their life, unless we become whatever very successful entrepreneurs and start businesses and stuff like that. But under normal employment circumstances, these guys earn insane amounts of money, and with higher sign-on bonuses, this is the discrepancy between the real world and the world that these people operate in is just going to become a lot more bigger, and potentially at the expense of the fan base, who are still, people like us, normal guys doing regular jobs, earning half decent money. And it just, to me, the gap is becoming a bit even bigger than it already is. And in addition to that, I mean, that's just my personal take on that. But in addition to that, what I find probably more relevant in this context is the fact that you have clubs out there whose business models rely on generating high transfer fees, the likes of Benfica Lisbon, but also potentially, we can count into that business model Borussia Dortmund, who've made good money out of expensive transfers. And these teams need that money to survive. So I'm wondering what is going to change when clubs do not have the power anymore, because they cannot pay their players such high sign-on bonuses. Everyone is just going to walk out of the door, wouldn't it?
I don't know. And I don't know if this is the right word that I'm going to use, but instead of wiring the money to another club, clubs will have to, whatever revenues they make through sponsorships, through selling out their stadiums, through TV money, they will need to keep internalize that money in order to be able to pay their players that they're going to sign on higher signing bonuses and higher salaries. But yeah, there will be no transfer sums coming in anymore. At the same time, there will be none outgoing. So I think the revenue model of the clubs, if that's really going to happen, again, this is all, hypothetical, but if that's really happening, the clubs that are currently generating a gain from transfers, such as Borussia Dortmund, I think you mentioned them right now. It's a good example, actually, because they used to have a kind of farming model, right, where they would buy a young Jude Bellingham from the island out of the youth academy, bring him over to Germany and really grow him as a professional player, and then transfer that player to Real Madrid well ahead of the expiration of the contract term, and make huge transfer sums with that, and generate a positive return on a transfer. So that would indeed go away, and that means those clubs that were relying on those type of income streams will have to change and reinvent their model again. So yeah, there might be actually a scenario where those type of clubs will be less wealthy, will be less competitive, because they don't generate the same amount of money in TV revenue, in sponsorship revenue, compared to, let's say, a Real Madrid or FC Barcelona or Bayern Munich, that just have bigger marketing teams, a bigger global interest in their product. So that might make the richer clubs richer and allow them to quicker get the players that they want to be even more successful. And it might make indeed the smaller clubs or the poorer clubs poorer. That could be a big, absolutely could. That could be a scenario, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm just in general a little more, I'm a little more on the negative side here. Of course, when we speak about clubs like Lisbon or Dortmund or Real Madrid, we're talking about the creme de la creme of European football. But you have plenty of smaller teams who rely exactly on that business model, like selling players from their youth academy, or buying players, as you said, for little money and then selling them for a profit. And I don't think they do this because they have no other revenue streams. And it's probably also easier said than done to just be like, well, okay, guys, that model won't work anymore for you because the rules have changed. Now, please go ahead and find another business model or another income stream. We both know well enough that this is probably not going to happen. So yeah, I'm a bit concerned. Obviously, we have to wait and see how it all pans out. But what I've heard and read and analyzed so far, I think, the gap between rich and poor, or highly successful and not successful at all, is just becoming more extreme, even more extreme than it currently is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, could certainly be the case. I mean, you could really spin this in every different direction, right? As a FIFA, I think, or UEFA, you have to have the interest of ensuring that competition is possible. And as we know already right now, it's an unfair world where, you know, certain clubs are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on transfers just because they get some rich sponsor or investor from the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, US private owners, and then other clubs with traditional membership structures are struggling. So UEFA tried to introduce concept like financial fair play in the past, which, you know, I think everyone always finds a loophole with that. But they're also discussing things like salary caps, etc. So there's certain models that the FIFA and the UEFA have to evaluate without going into further details there. But I think in general, if and that's where I'm going with this point, if the player has freedom of movement and can basically pick whatever employer they want at any time of the year, then like, who says they're bound to even stay within this traditional European sports structure, right? At one point, I think if the FIFA, for example, says we're now introducing a salary cap and that's the maximum amount of money that you can earn here, similar to the US leagues, for example, so are all closed shops with franchises, somebody can come around and say, okay, then maybe I do create a model such as the Super League, where, you know, only X clubs are playing in, and where the salary cap is much higher, and you know, and try to attempt to change the system, in that direction. So I think it's hard to really stop the train. Everything is moving towards more money, bigger revenue. And I think rulings like that will trigger more discussion on how the future of the European sports system actually, should look like, or how it should turn out. So again, you can spin this in so many different directions.
Yeah, that's exactly why I always find it so interesting to discuss these topics. I think there's just so much room for interpretation. Eventually, what's going to happen next, just like pretty much in any other negotiation between employers and employees in the corporate world, the FIFA and the player unions like the FIF Pro will eventually need to sit down and try to balance or establish some sort of balanced regulations that work for everyone, you know, that on the one side protect both the players' rights and but also the club's interests. So let's see. In a best case scenario, it's going to lead to clear and fair criteria for when a contract can be terminated and when it cannot. How, let's say, compensation in any form is calculated. But we will see. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we will discuss this topic here in the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Alex, because you mentioned union, I mean, if you look again at the US sports and how common it is to have a players union here, and how the players union can even go on strike and lock out a season, I think this type of organization will play a huge role going forward, not only when it comes to negotiating the terms of these contracts now with the FIFA and with the UEFA, but also with another topic that we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks with increasing injuries. Key players such as Rodri, such as Toni Kroos, actually, even though he's retired, he made a big spin on that as well on his podcast, I believe. The insane schedule that these players now have with the Club World Cup coming up in a World Cup or European Championship free summer. Actually, now they put a 4-week Club World Cup on the calendar. The new mode of the Champions League, all those things that we discussed on this podcast over the past weeks as well. Players are now stepping up. This FIFPro Players Union is becoming more powerful. They want more influence. And I think it can actually be a good movement to say, okay, these are the salary terms. These are the contract terms that as a players union we agree to. But at the same time, games are limited to X and so on and so on. So I think maybe this, to give it one more try, to spin it a little bit more positive, could create a bigger discussion and create a new set of rules for everyone and give the players more voice. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the most positive outtake out of this ruling. No matter how you look at the money, and yeah, they're making a lot of money. They're making too much money maybe, and potentially even more with this. The players still don't have a big voice. I always feel like Gianni Infantino is sitting up there at the top of FIFA, and he's doing whatever the freak he wants. He just says, oh, now we're going to put another tournament in 6 weeks. You go play. You can be happy to be a pro football player. And I think that's going to change slowly.
Oh, absolutely. Now let's see what happens. I'm very curious after what you've just said. Now I might be a little more positive about it. It's certainly better that teams and associations and the players or their representatives battle it out or discuss it on the at the table instead of players going on a strike. Otherwise, we're not going to have any more topics to discuss when football is going to stop for a few weeks. We don't want to see that. So yeah,
no.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, but while it's going on, there's more than enough topics that we can cover here week over week. So this was just another great example. Definitely enough content to fill a week where games are more rare, where only the national teams are playing. As this is the end of today's episode, please make sure you subscribe and recommend this podcast to anyone that found love for German football and our stories. We will be back next week with the latest highlight out of the German top leagues. But until then, have a good week and bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.